A wise man once said, "You can't see the forest for the trees." And this is exactly what happens when they teach you to analyze music as a series of individual chords. You learn the words, but you can't speak the language. In this series, I'll show you the 3 essential harmonic progressions you need to know to actually understand harmony in classical music, plus a bonus formal function that I'll reveal in the end. After each video, we'll put this knowledge into practice analyzing 2 of the most famous pieces ever written, and hopefully you'll see how your harmonic analysis skills upgrade in real time. Let's begin! In music, sequences represent the forward motion, and they can be roughly defined as a repeated music pattern at different pitch levels. There are 2 types of sequences: melodic sequences and harmonic sequences. In the melodic sequences, the iterations of the model are related to the melodic content, but not necessarily to the harmony. As you can see, the sequential repetitions need not be a strict note-by-note transposition, as long as the overall melodic and rhythmic patterns bear enough resemblance to the model to be recognized as such. Purely melodic sequences built on static harmony are mostly used as opening gambits. A commonly used variant of this procedure is what William Kaplan names the question and answer model, also mostly used as opening gambit. In the question and answer model, we've got a melodic sequence in 2 steps. The first one moves from one initial harmony to another, usually the dominant or the subdominant. The second step, on the other hand, mirrors this harmonic motion moving back to the initial harmony. Hence, from the harmonic point of view, these types of melodic sequences are best understood as prolongational, as I explained in my previous video. Harmonic sequences are progressions characterized by a consistent pattern of bass motion. In most cases, harmonic sequences also display some degree of sequential melodic activity, however, this is not strictly necessary. In these cases, the sequential pattern is always determined by the bass motion, even if other motivic repetitions come into play in the melody. In this example, the motivic pattern of the melody sounds a total of 7 times, but the actual harmonic sequence consists of only 4 stages. We can distinguish between non-modulating and modulating harmonic sequences. In non-modulating harmonic sequences, every chord of the progression can be analyzed as part of the same key, in this case C major. In modulating harmonic sequences, however, the tonal center may switch 1 or more times between repetitions, so the progression as a whole is usually best understood as a succession of passing keys. Since modulating harmonic sequences are, by definition, tonally unstable, composers often end them with a cadence in order to confirm the last tonal center, but this is a topic I'll discuss in more depth in future videos. Depending on the bass pattern, I distinguish the following groups of harmonic sequences. Stepwise bass sequences, in which the bass moves by step always in the same direction, either upwards or downwards. And leaping bass sequences, in which the bass leaps usually following a pattern of 2 distinct intervals going in opposite directions. Within the stepwise bass group, there are 4 prototypes that always move downwards: the stepwise romanesca, the preener, the tight bass, and the lamento. 2 other prototypes always move upwards, the diatonic and chromatic monte. And finally, there are 2 prototypes that can move either upwards or downwards, the faux-bourdeaux and the so-called omnibus. It's important to point out that not all theories regard these prototypes as true sequences. However, as we shall see later, composers often use them as such. Number 1. Stepwise romanesca. The stepwise Romanesca is built on a stepwise descending bass, harmonized as an alternation between root position and first inversion chords. In this example, Beethoven used this prototype as opening gambit, connecting with a cadence. Number 2. The Priner. In the Priner schema, the bass and the top voice move in descending parallel thirds or tenths. The notes of the bass are the 4th, 3rd, 2nd and 1st degree of the key, while in the top voice we always have the 6th, 5th, 4th and 3rd degree. The Priner schema is normally used as a continuation of a previous material, and it can also be used to modulate by simply starting it in the corresponding degrees of the final key, which is what Scarlatti did in this example. Number 3. The tithe bass. Very similar to the stepwise Romanesca, but now the bass is kept as a suspension that must resolve downwards in the next chord. Number 4. The Lamento. The lamento, which means sorrow in Italian, was a powerful expressive device for minor mode works, and it could be defined as a chromatic ornamentation of the Phrygian tetrachord. Number 5. The diatonic Monte. This schema is built on a stepwise ascending bass with an alternation between root position and first inversion chords in order to avoid parallel fifths. Number 6. The chromatic Monte, or simply Monte, as the German theorist Joseph Rippel named it in the 18th century. Similar to the previous case, here we've got an alternation between first inversion and root position chords, but now the bass ascends by half steps, making it very useful for modulations. The descending pattern of the melody is also very characteristic, although not mandatory. Number 7. The Faux-Bourdeaux. The Faux-Bourdeaux was an ancient contrapuntal technique from the 15th century, but still in use occasionally during the common practice of the 18th and 19th centuries. It can be described as the harmonization of a stepwise ascending or descending bass by means of a series of chords that move in parallel fashion and present a third and a sixth above the bass, or in other words, first inversion triads. In this example, Vivaldi used the Faux-Bourdeaux as the basis for a melodic sequence. Number 8. The Omnibus. The omnibus is a dominant prolongation technique mostly used in minor mode works. In this procedure, a dominant function chord, usually a diminished 7th chord, is connected with a different inversion of itself by means of a series of intervening chromatic chords in which the bass and other voice move in opposite directions and stepwise motion. Hence, we can find examples of ascending or descending omnibus. Let's talk about leaping bass sequences. I distinguish two main groups. First, those in which every two bass notes are a second apart, and second, those in which said notes are a third apart. In the first group, we've got the down 5 up 4, also known as the circle of fifths, down 3 up 2, down 3 up 4, and the fonte schema. In the second group, we've got the descending thirds and the leaping romanesca. Apart from this, other types of sequences are also theoretically possible, such as the down 3 up 5 or down 2 up 5, but they are uncommon in classical music, so I leave them out for now. Number 9. The circle of fifths, possibly the most popular type of harmonic sequence, characterized by a consistent down 5 up 4 motion in the bass, or its inversion, up 4 down 5. If all the intervals in the bass are perfect, this sequence will naturally modulate through the circle of fifths, making it one of the easiest ways to get to distant keys. However, using augmented or diminished intervals in the bass is also possible, and it allows for the music to remain in the initial key, like in this example. Number 10. Down 3, up 2. Closely related to the previous type, the down 3 always leads to a 7th chord in first inversion, and the up 2 to a root position triad. Number 11. Down 3, up 4. A less common type of sequence which could be seen as an ascending variant of the previous one. Number 12. The fonte schema. The fonte schema was one of the most recurrent patterns used at the beginning of the second part in minuets and other binary forms. At first glance, it may look like a variant of the down 3 up 2 sequence, but there are a few important differences. First, the fonte schema consists of only two events, two main harmonies preceded by their corresponding dominants. The pattern ends there and doesn't progress further. Second, in the fonte schema, the last chord of the first event is a minor triad, while the last chord of the second event is a major one, with its root a whole step below. In other words, the first main harmony functions as the second degree of the last one in a major mode key context. What we see here is the standard voice leading for this schema, with the bass raising a half step and then down a third, and the top voice descending by a stepwise motion. However, the schema works just as well if the voices appear inverted. The two events of the fonte schema may appear separated as part of a bigger melodic structure, such is the case in this example by Mozart. Number 13. Descending thirds. As the name suggests, in this pattern we've got a series of root position chords placed a descending third apart. It's worth noting how easily this prototype can be transformed into a descending stepwise bass sequence by means of intervening chords or passing notes. And number 14, the leaping romanesca, or simply romanesca. A variant of the plain descending thirds, in which the bass goes down 4 and up 2. Let's hear the most famous example of a leaping romanesca in classical music. Yes, that's right, Canon Rock by Jerry C. Let's test what we learned today. This is the beginning of Bach's Prelude No. 1 in C major, which we already analyzed in my previous video as a prolongational progression. Now let's continue a few bars more. Before I share my analysis, pause the video and try to figure out what's going on by yourself. What we've got here is a melodic sequence built on the tithe bass formula. The bass note on bar 5 is kept as a suspension on bar 6 and resolved downwards as consonant note on bar 7. The process is repeated next, with the bass kept as a suspension on bar 8 and resolved downwards on bar 9. Notice that unlike in the previous cases, this last chord is not a phrase inversion triad, but a minor 7th chord. This is relevant because Bach will use this chord as link between the previous sequence and the following cadential progression, but that's something we'll talk about in future videos. It's also worth noting that this is a modulating sequence. The piece starts in C major, but from bar 7 onwards, the music can already be analyzed in the key of G major. Let's do the same with another example. This is a clear example of a Priner schema turned into a melodic sequence. Curiously enough, this is a response to a previous Priner used by Mozart at the end of the opening phrase. And that's pretty much it. Nobody said music has to be complicated. That's all for today. Support me on Patreon for more content like this, and see you next time.